We're proud to be an official 2024 Brooklyn Book Festival bookend event. Bookend events, in person in all 5 boroughs and online, run from September 22nd through 30th and are a vital part of the Brooklyn Book Festival's mission to present programming that is hip, smart, diverse, and inclusive for NYC and beyond. We hope you can join us this weekend in downtown Brooklyn. The Brooklyn Book Festival Children's Day is Saturday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., and the Festival Day and Literary Marketplace is on Sunday from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Pick up a festival guide or visit www.brooklynbookfestival.org for more.
For more info. Hello and welcome to the Writing Community Chat Show. That video clearly cut off a little bit late. We are really glad to be here for the 3rd time in a row representing the Brooklyn Book Festival virtual bookend events. And we are very, very grateful for you guys to be tuning in live to watch this show. This panel show, we're going to be talking about a lot of good stuff in the world of writing. And I am here with my wonderful co-host, Chris Hooley. Hi, Chris. How are you doing?
I'm very good, thank you. How are you, Aga?
I'm really good. Missed last week's show due to illness, and you had a wonderful chat with our great friend Dale, self-publishing guru. Gutted to miss that. I've been keeping up with my writing on Substack, which is really cool. Got a lot of good feedback from that. So it's been a good week. I've got a nice long weekend planned and this show tonight to kick it off with. So I'm very excited. How about yourself?
Yeah, it was a great chat with Dale. Loved talking to him. His enthusiasm is infectious. So much so that I was writing when I got home today after doing all the necessary bits. And I nearly missed the show as a result. So yeah, got here and I'm glad to be here and I'm looking forward to chatting to you guys. So yeah, it's going to be good.
I mean, it's only the Brooklyn Book Festival. But what we're going to do is we're going to bring on our very, very good friend and our first ever guest we had on the show, Halo Scott. We're going to chat to her very quickly before bringing on the rest of our guests about Queer Indie, who is part of our show tonight. The Writing Community Chat Show and Queer Indie are putting this event on. So please do check out the links when you can. And to talk about that Queer Indie and what that means, here is Halo Scott, the wonderful horror author that she is. Halo, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Yeah, really excited and good. How is Halo's world?
It's good. Yeah, I can't complain. I think it's all really, it's still warm here, which is nice. I think I'm not used to the temperature's going to dip soon. So, I mean, I know all I do is talk about weather, but I prefer so.
Yeah, I have the show jumper on today because it is a little bit chilly here.
I know I was going to wear a sweatshirt, but then I was like, maybe not. I'm trying to get the last bit out of summer, even though it's fall. So.
Yeah, definitely. So as we mentioned, the Writing Community Chat Show and Queer Indie are putting on this wonderful event for Brooklyn Book Festival. Halo, talk to us about Queer Indie. Where did that start? And what do people take away from being a part of that or following that?
Yeah, I mean, it started because I wanted to do like conventions and stuff. And I was trying to also look for at the same time. So part of me was like, I want to have fun book parties, but also I was reading books that kind of, I think, showed me a mirror of who I was for the first time in my life. Yeah. And I knew other people had kind of seen that. And a lot of those books tend to be kind of in the indie space. And I wanted to be able to kind of elevate those and be able to promote them and just be really inclusive, because I think, there's a lot of hate in the world, but there's a lot of love too. And to kind of focus on being like aggressively inclusive, aggressively accepting, and just really creating a family where, no one's a jerk. I think it was really important.
Absolutely. I think, it's so important we see so much hate in the world, all over social media, all over the news. To share that kind of love and build a community of love is so vitally important. I think that is great for anyone to do, whether it's through videos or social posts or whatever it may be. I think that's a really good message. And Chris, I'll let you talk about this. Why did our show start, the Writing Community Chat Show? Why does that exist, and what can people expect from it?
Well, the Writing Community Chat Show exists. If you want the real story, it exists because I read your book, I reviewed your book, and then you got in touch with me and said, oh, I've got this great idea. But from the outside, it exists because, again, we like to bring people together. We like to chat. We like to learn. We like to find out about people's journeys into writing. And, you know, we've loved doing it. We've been doing it now for, this is like the 4th year. And, you know, every person is different. Every conversation is different. Everyone's writing journey is different. And again, I suppose there's a lot of crossovers between people's journey into writing and people's journeys in their own lives as well. You know, whether it's the people who are involved with Queer Indie or whether it's people who are involved with the Writing Community Chat Show. The one thing that's common all the way through is that everyone's journey is different, and we get to hear those journeys on a weekly basis, and that's what keeps us going and keeps us motivated to hear from new people.
And what people take from that and Queer Indie, or the stories of people, is a lot of inspiration from their lives and from their writing journeys. And I think that's really key. And that's what we're going to learn a lot of today through failing. Failing is something that people look at and are scared of, but it's something you should absolutely embrace, because through failure, it has made me a much better author. And we're going to talk about that very soon. And we're going to learn a lot from people's failures. And I'm sure you can relate to a lot of them as well. And what we want to do is hear from you in the chat. Please pop your questions in there, pop your comments in there about how you've dealt with these things that we talk about. And we will look at them as well when we can and discuss those further. So what I'm going to do, we're going to bring on the rest of our panel, introduce them very quickly, and then we're going to get into the conversation. So again, remember the comments there for you guys. Please use them. First up, we have Anya. Hello, Anya. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How about you?
Yes, very, very good. Anya is in the world that has been, I suppose Halo as well. The weather has been horrendous. We're talking about weather, but you are luckily with us tonight after you've had a pretty terrible week. But you're all good, and you're all safe, importantly.
Yeah, no, we're good. We're safe. So very grateful for that, and very grateful that I'm here. I would have been here regardless. There were plans because this is important. I've been looking forward to it. But yeah, I think in this context, gratitude is important. So
absolutely, I love that. Next up, we have Adria. Hello, how are you doing?
Hi. Good. You know, just keeping it together in between projects. It's been a little while since I've done a book thing because I'm trying to temper my next failure into something huge.
I love that. Perfect. And finally, coming up to chat with us is Anna. Hello, Anna.
Hi, guys.
How is Anna's week?
Anna's week has been okay. It's been pretty good weather, and it's been all right.
And the catchphrase?
Anna is not dead yet.
Yeah, she's not dead. She's here with us, which is fantastic. Not dead yet. Okay, so first of all, we're going to talk about learning from failure and overcoming rejection. Something that a lot of people will face in the writing world. Starting off with anyone who kind of wants to start this off, who can kind of speak up about this. Learning from failure is a really big thing that every single writer will go through. Most people, not even writers, most people in life will go through this. I'm pretty sure everybody will go through this. How do we, what's your stories, first of all, and how do we adapt and learn from that? Anyone got a example? Come on.
I'll jump
Go
in.
on. Yes.
Okay. So when I was writing my first book, I was sending out queries to many agents, and I basically, the first part of my book was a huge info dump, as in chapters and chapters of backstory and info dump. And I was failing with getting any traction for it. And it really, really hurt at first, completely and utterly, because I was doubting myself as a writer. I'd done academic writing before, but never fiction in that arena, especially never in novel length fiction. And so for probably a good year or so, I kept getting feedback of you can't give us a huge backstory and info dump at the beginning because your reader's going to get bored. And at first I was like, no, of course, you know, they're wrong. But then after hearing that feedback many times, I worked with an editor to get some tips to make the pacing of the novel better. So so that was definitely important to take that feedback in consideration as I was failing with my first attempts.
So with the idea of working with an editor to improve what you kind of highlighted as a failure, what do you know any tips that you could give to the people watching that you can remember from that editor that really helped you on that journey?
Yeah, one of the things was to vary my narration with exposition, imagery, action and not have too much of one thing together, because otherwise that tires the reader. Also, to not, and I think this is a tip from another famous author, but basically to not get too attached to a sentence or two, because if it's dragging down the book, let it go. And basically to embrace the revision process. So this person was a content editor and said, this is working, but this isn't. So rewrite these parts and go from there.
I love that.
Yeah. And she said not to take everything under consideration all the time, not to listen to every single suggestion, because, I know the book, but at the same time, not to get too stuck in the ego of it all.
Amazing. Great tip there. Thank you so much. Next up, who have we got? We see some hands. Yeah, Halo?
No, go ahead, Anna.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I come from a music background, which is basically like constant rejection. And so I think for me, you get like 999 rejections and one compliment, and that's just part of the industry. So you do kind of feel like you're constantly failing until you like get ahead. So I think I kind of had it written in my bones. Like I was like, yes, rejection, yes, failure. But I think you do learn from there's a whole, if you're not going to learn how to walk, right? If you don't fall down a few times and if you don't get back up after you fall, you're definitely not going to learn. Same thing with like riding a bike and with swimming and everything. And I think writing to build that muscle memory or mental memory of you fall down, you get back up, takes the same kind of, you have to keep falling, you have to keep on scraping your knees, you have to keep on barreling through it. I do think that for me, it's hard, and I'm curious, Anya, how you dealt with this, to be authentic to yourself when you're getting rejection and critique, but also while improving, because I've gotten literally like the opposite reactions to my work. Some people are like, you shouldn't have any swears or sex or drugs in it, and someone else might be like, you know what, you can really ramp it up. So I think finding who you are through the failure is important too, to accept help, but also be true to yourself, if that makes sense. It does, absolutely. And that was one thing the editor said too. And I think that what helped is that I worked in, I've been a teacher in higher ed for a while. So sometimes I tell my students, here's my feedback, get feedback on this, but also, your idea. So it was also, she told me to kind of take a step back and pretend I was a reader. If I was a reader, would I want to come into this book and read 3 chapters of backstory? And then I think it kind of got me out of my head for little tips like that. But she also said, again, to reject the things that were the core elements of me. So I kind of liken it to like self-improvement and self-growth. Like I'm not going to change the core of who I am, the essence of who I am inside. But at the same time, I can make adjustments to grow as a person. So I try to do that similarly with writing in a book. Grow the book and learn from the process and improve it, because multiple drafts are needed, but at the same time, not to write something else for somebody else, if that makes sense.
I love what you just discussed there, because so many people will deal with editors perhaps for the first time and take their word as gospel and change the way they are. But we know as writers, you need to find your own voice. So I think that is crucial to learn from what you just discussed, that you need to know who you are. Regardless of professional advice, you might have that. But also, if it's not what you believe in, then perhaps you need to adjust to that. So thank you so much for that great advice. Anna, I know you were going to put your hand up. So what advice have you got about what failures have you dealt with and how did you overcome them?
So I come from like an academic background, and I'm used to doing a lot of academic writing. And one thing that I had always found when I was doing like whatever the analysis was I was always butting heads with whoever my supervisor was or whoever the professor was on my ideas. And they would give me feedback that was based on like their perception of whatever the topic was that I was writing about. So like their feedback would be, oh, I don't think this is the right way to like analyze this character or analyze this situation, because that's not what I agree with. And I would always get really like frustrated and really mad, because I'm like, I don't agree with you. Like, that's not how I view this character. That's not how I view the situation. This isn't what I'm writing about, et cetera, et cetera. And then somebody pointed out to me, I had a professor who we butted heads on a topic, And he handed me back my paper, and he still gave me an A on the paper, but he handed it back to me with all this feedback. And he was like, this is how I perceive this topic, and this is what I think about this topic. But if you think something different, you shouldn't just change your entire topic to make me happy. You need to write what you think is right, regardless of whether or not you think I'm going to be happy with it. And that kind of got me out of my head when it came to all of my writing, because it made me think more about how I viewed everything, like how I viewed whatever it was I was writing about, as opposed to what would make somebody else who was reading my writing happy.
Yeah, great. I like that. Adria, what about yourself?
It's funny because Joanne popped in there and said no cussing, no sex, impossible. And that's, I had a crisis in this myself not long ago because, my books are kind of what you'd call sweet, I guess. And, it's not, there's conflict and there's drama, but it's kind of like in a way, you kind of know everybody's going to be okay because that's a comfort kind of cozy thing that I'm setting up, even though it's not completely that. But I fought it, I was like, okay, suddenly I'm reading about everyone who's like, we only really read super smutty books. And it's like, oh, well, I didn't do that. They could be reading my book if I'd done that. But if I did that, it'd be a nightmare. I think it wouldn't come out that well. So no sex and no swears. Yes, it is entirely possible, Joanne.
I think we need to switch the people who are telling us, Drea, because I'll send them your way and you can send them my way.
Yeah, definitely. Chris, over to you. Have you learned from certain failures in your writing time, and how do you adjust to that?
Well, I'm going to be a bit controversial here and say that I want to remove failure from everyone's vocabulary and mindset, because failure for me should be something that is defined by other people and not by yourself. So let other people define failure, but don't bring it into your vocabulary, because set yourself a goal and then just do whatever it takes until you get there. Yeah. Some people may see that as failing, but I don't see that as failing. I see it as, I've not got there yet. I've just found out different ways not to get there. So like Thomas Edison with the light bulb situation, when he said, I didn't fail, I just found 300 and odd ways of not to make a light bulb. Take that energy and let other people define what failure is, because, like people have said, babies don't care when they can't walk. They just get up and they keep going. If you told a baby you can't walk, you're a failure, it might not try again. And then we'd all just be crawling around like slugs. So get rid of the failure element. Get rid of it out of your vocabulary.
That's kind of what this topic is like, to take that whole, if we go to the 398th step and then we get scared of failure, then we won't take that 399th and 400th. And I've been on the verge of that myself lately. It's like, oh, I'm not doing this yet, and I'm not doing that yet. And then I, for a while, I said, okay, I need to promote books. I need to get people to buy the books I already have. And it's like, well, that's not helping either, because you got to keep writing stuff to have
the world
get that attention back.
Yeah, the world will throw enough shit at you anyway and give you enough reasons to feel bad. So don't add another one in your own mind.
Yeah. Well, me and you, Chris, have always had this little Chris versus Chris fun thing, right? And I see it. I get what you're saying. I completely do. And Joanne says perhaps better defined as discovery or growth. Exactly what you're saying, and I agree with that. But for me, I wrote a good article about this recently on Substack. It was about my failures and how to learn from it. And it was about how I'd done a lot of stuff myself. So it wasn't kind of like some of what the others authors are talking about through agents and perhaps through editors. I learned by writing and rushing things and learning from those mistakes, and seeing what I published in my first book as a grammatical failure, because I've had issues with grammatics in my book. So for me, that was seen as a failure through my rushing to myself. Now, other people have informed me of that, but I know those are there. And what has made me a better author is me now seeing those errors, which I didn't see before. So for me, that failure, or the perhaps seeing the discovery of growth, is what's led me to become a better author. So I kind of agree, and I kind of also want to keep failure in my
mind. I'm
life.
going to combat you there, Raga, because I read those books and I didn't see any failure in terms of like I enjoyed those stories. So
yeah.
you know, again, you can look at it in that way and go, oh, there's some failures there, or you can look at it and go, do you know what? There's some really good writing there, and there's some really good stories and character arcs and all that good stuff. So again, what is your goal? I think that's what people should focus on. What is your goal? What are you happy writing? What do you want to write? And then write that and get that into the world, and then let other people judge whether you failed or not.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so moving on quite nicely into kind of the second part, I guess, is adapting new writing methods, because that is something that I did to improve my writing. So who kind of feels like over their writing career has adapted new writing methods, and how have you adapted that into your work, and what are the kind of results? Anyone got any writing methods they can throw out there?
I mean, I think for me, I felt crippled by self-doubt a lot. And so, like, I tend to be a perfectionist. I want everything to be on the page, like to be perfect when it comes out and pristine and exactly how it's going to be when I publish. But the truth is that, like, you're always going to make edits. And what I found is that when I feel the story more, it's usually when the story does need more edits at like a line level and a grammar like kind of level. But the story flows better and it has more heart and everything. So I learned that by letting go and having a less rigid and kind of controlled writing style, I was able to get more, I think, out of my characters, because that's how I used to write. And then I think I got scared and filled with doubt. And, you know, if you were talking, there are rejections and people comment and stuff. So I'm like, oh no, I have to be this way. And so I felt like I was kind of shrinking into this box where I'm like, the only way I can write this. And I realized I was like, I'm not even enjoying this, but I'm like, this is my passion. So why am I like torturing myself over it? So yeah, I would say that lately I've tried to be a little bit more like, I guess, surrender to the process more, instead of being like, you know, this is how I have to write, this is how it has to sound after a certain amount of time and everything.
Yeah. I guess that's dealing with preconceptions and expectations of what you think it should be like. And again, that comes down, I think, to finding your own voice and what you want your stories to be and what you want your readers to take your stories as. So I think that's quite valuable, and having that perception of what it should be and not stepping to another level of expectation because of what you've previously read or learned, I think is quite good.
It's a good point.
Uniqueness.
To like write from your heart, because that's, you know, I mean, you may fail to get it to readers, you may fail to get that movie contract or to go to series on Netflix if that's one of your goals. You can fail at all of that, but if the book is there, you've at least succeeded in getting that story onto the page the way you want it. And we're talking with writing methods. It's not like I changed anything in my method, but with time and practice, I improved a lot. I think the problem is now I can't get people to that end of the series to see those improvements because, like, you know, I guess the first one's kind of stops them before they get there. But in time, I got to figure out a way around that, which will be more new books that aren't connected to that, I suppose.
I think all your books are amazing, Drew. So I think that, you know, starting at the beginning too, you've got a lot of heart, and that comes through. You've also got a lot of skill to show that heart. I mean, I think there's a success in authenticity and in staying true to your story and what you want to tell. And I think that will show through, which is like when I was trying to write a way that was kind of what I thought the world wanted me to kind of write like. And then I had someone comment that they're like, oh yeah, I really can't get into your writing style. I hate it. I was like, well, then why the hell am I trying to do it this way? You know, sorry, just to put in. So yeah. And like, you know, that authenticity rings through, and it's a beautiful thing.
It's amazing to me that someone would say that to you, because what the fuck would they be wanting if you're not it with some of those amazing passages and awesome one-liners and things that you throw at it that just go make me gobsmacked. Well, okay, yeah, maybe not that one.
Brilliant. Anyone else got any Anya?
Oh, yeah, I was gonna say, building off of what Halo and Drea are saying, you know, about the feeling in the heart. You know, sometimes like I'm like Halo in that I like a certain structured approach to certain things. And I often plan out the big arcs of my books before I get too far into the process. But there are moments when I have these spontaneous ideas where I see the scene or I feel the scene, or I know what's going to happen in maybe 5 pages. And so I have to give myself permission to just kind of go with it. Like you're saying, Halo, and feel it. It doesn't have to be perfect, but there's some emotion or the essence of something that I have in my head and can see in front of my face. And the only way to get that out is to put aside those rules about writing that I like and the structuralist approach that I like to certain things. So I think there is something with that, and just kind of seeing where that moment goes, or even talking into my phone. This is something where I'm like, I can see it and like, let's talk into it and then listen to it and then type it. So that way I don't have the page, which I love, but also the white page is a scary thing. So that's something.
I think that is really good, because you can spend a lot of time staring at a page, which kind of can be quite congesting at the same time. Whereas when you take away that page and use your maybe phone for the notes, or you have time with your mind, which is the part of your process that is actually quite creative. So I think stepping away from what you can actually see in front of you and focusing on, this is the current situation of the story, I'm literally on that line, and having that mind exploration is very valuable. That's why we preach so many times about going for a nice walk when you're having writer's block, because it can just free that creative process, which is really good. And that's something that I have done as a process to change my writing, just taking the time away from the blinking cursor, and just going out and just switching off. But then what I find is when I'm out on that walk, the creative juices just flow naturally, and I can't help it, but I'm suddenly wanting to get back on that cursor and start typing. Whereas when you sat there trying to force it, it's not happening. So I think that's something I've done is very good. Anna, what about yourself?
I know that for me, I actually like the blank page. I like the blank page better than I like a filled page. I see it, like, for me, I see it as a challenge. I'm like, oh, I need to put something down on here. But I know that for me, like, the thing that I like best in writing is, like, if I have something that I'm doing and I get to write a fight scene. And, like, a lot of times what I'll do is, like, because I have backgrounds in different styles of fighting, I will sometimes, like, choreograph a fight scene and just put it on that blank page and then save that doc so that I can use it for something else later on. Like, that to me is a lot of fun, like being able to have those things that you can come back to later, and maybe it doesn't quite fit exactly what you were gonna do with it originally, but then you have something there that you can adapt and reuse later.
I have so many little files like that full of things that I didn't quite use. And I've got them all set over and ready for that moment where I go, oh, that's what. And of course, a lot of it's very specific to what I was working on at that time, and I can't use it, but it's still there because I can't let it.
Gabby left a comment earlier on and says, when I'm particularly attached to a sentence, I copy and paste it into a Word doc to see if I can recycle it for future use. And that's exactly what you guys are talking about.
Yep, that's a good one.
Yeah, good advice. Chris?
Yeah, I think consistency is key over time. But what I've sort of picked up in my own writing recently is, depending on where I'm at in that current moment in my mind, it depends on what I write, but I'm always writing something. So, for example, if I'm like hyper emotional and like, oh, I've got a feeling that I'm currently experiencing, I might write poetry instead of writing fiction, where I know what I need to do, and I've sort of mapped out, and I'm trying to get a certain scene down. So I'll write poetry instead. When my mind's clear and I'm feeling good, I might write nonfiction, and again, really try and lean into that a little bit. So I'm always writing, but it depends on sort of my mental state, depending on which area of writing I'm in that, if that makes sense. And I feel like that makes me a bit more productive because I'm always picking up different things and sort of flexing that writing muscle.
I think one of the processes that I think it was you that talked about it, Chris, before on the show, was how people can write different parts of this story when it's sparking, when it's creative, rather than going through what you're writing at the time and maybe being stuck on that. If there's another part of your brain that's thinking this would be a great part of the story, to jump on that part of the story and write that part of the story and then go back. That's something that I think is a really good writing method that you talked about before. And I think that's something that people can adapt.
And what you find if you do that is that the dots start to connect themselves. You may have 10 scenes that have just come in the spur of the moment and you think, how do these fit together? And then maybe you go on that walk like you suggested, and then suddenly all the dots just align and you're like, I know what I'm doing.
Lovely to see Anna just spinning in circles. Okay,
it's the
guys.
commute for me where I get what Chris was just talking about. Like I'll be able to sometimes just, because you're zoned out, you're going straight in the path and there's not having to think about anything. And it's not many times in the day when I get to not think about anything else. But that's, I've daydreamed most of my scenes before I've ever written.
Yeah.
And that's a really just important, if we're talking about process and that's something that's really important for mine.
That's an interesting word you use, daydreamer. How many of you, if you remember, were daydreamers when you were younger? Because I certainly was.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I'd be really interested.
This is where we all wound up, was right here.
Yeah. How many people are watching? Let us know if you were a daydreamer when you're younger and now you're a creative type. Because I wonder if there's some sort of connection there. Quite possibly. Nice to see you back, Anna.
I'm so sorry. So they've been doing work. They've been doing work on like the 4 streets around my street, and then like the 4 streets around me, and everybody is having Wi-Fi problems. Like I have not been able to do pretty much anything the past 2 days.
Can you open the window and shout at them? We'll just enjoy it from here.
They're not on my street today. They're on my street, but it's not the street.
We'll come round and we'll have a word. Okay. Not the next round, but the round after, we'll be taking your questions, guys. So if you have questions for us about anything in the writing world, about something we've said, please pop them in the chat and we will talk about them. But before we do that, we're going to talk about switching genres and particularly what could be challenging or what could be useful. I know it's a thing that some authors do. Sometimes they change with a pen name to not confuse the readers. But has anyone switched genres, and how did you approach that?
I kind of did. My first novel was dystopian young adult. And while I was looking for a publisher for that, I wasn't getting traction at first because people were saying that the market was oversaturated with young adult dystopian. So I started writing historical fiction, historical magical fiction, or I guess you could say magical realism, historical or historical fantasy. I'm not quite sure what, but I started writing that, not because I thought that the genre might sell more, or maybe I did, but in any case, I knew that I could also write in that genre. And so I decided to do something else. I kept the same pen name. And then while I was writing that book, I found a publisher for the first novel, which was nice. But I did pivot into a different genre, but it was one that I feel I could write. And now I'm switching to contemporary crime and historical fantasy kind of together in the same book. So I think they're all related in that they have elements of magical realism to them. So there's a common thread, but at the same time, they are different genres technically, I think.
I know you mentioned there's a common thread, but did you feel like you had to adjust anything to keep your previous readers in the same world? And did you change anything in terms of the way you were dealing with things such as promotion and stuff to attract maybe new readers?
That's a good question. I don't think necessarily in terms of promotion, but I started using different hashtags in order to promote the different genres of works. But I definitely needed a lot more research for the historical novel than I did for the dystopian novel, which I pretty much built the world for that because I could take that creative liberty. So there was a lot more of the research and the preparation for getting the information that was definitely a shift.
Yeah, amazing. Anyone else? Have you dabbled with genres different to what you've previously written in, or are you thinking of doing that?
I mean, I've written in, I guess they would be considered different genres. I kind of put them under the bubble of dark fiction because like the Rift Cycle was kind of like horror, sci-fi, fantasy, psychological thriller, romance. So I don't know if you could say I was writing a different genre, more that I took those genres and I think I try not to mash them all together anymore because what I realized is that I was getting a lot of horror and romance readers, and they tended to be the ones that would vibe the most with it. But because the sci-fi and fantasy elements were kind of, I don't know, like more soft than hard, if that makes sense. I found that I was losing certain people from certain genres because of that. So I think what I've been trying to do is more choose like 2 genres instead of like 5 or however that was.
If you figure out how to choose 2 genres instead of 5, let me know.
I haven't succeeded yet, but
that's kind of what I do too. Is it's like, you know, my Lady Dreamscape series has a bit of everything in it, but then I also have a giant robot book and then a book with witches that has nothing to do with and I feel that the you know the series and the witch book are kind of more alike, and then that other thing's so different from, I don't know how to market it. But on that same note, I don't think I'd do something under a different name because then how would they find it?
So, Adria, do you think having those different kind of stories, possibly different kind of genres, are you still trying to find your author voice? Because people talk about that quite a lot. Or are you just enjoying different genres that you feel like you need to create in different worlds?
I feel like I'm enjoying all those elements. I feel like that because I have an author voice, it has to have some magic, some mystery, some love, some music, some of this and some of that. And yes, I do feel like sometimes it is too much for some readers. Like they'll be going along and they're like, well, I don't get this reference. And I know, I'm sorry, but without the pop culture stuff, I just don't know if it would be worth doing for me. So yes, it is my author voice, and it does hurt me at the same time. So.
I think it's great, and I would say actually I would say if you want an umbrella, I think yours is like urban speculative fiction because you have urban elements in all of it. And I think that's why I like seeing those pop culture references because I think it's grounding, whereas fantasy and sci-fi can sometimes be more out there, which I like too, but it is also, I don't know, when you have those grounding elements, I feel like, oh, it could be real. It could happen. It's connected to our world. So for me, that's what I love about your books because they feel like they could actually be happening, you know, that they are real.
That sums it up. I like that. I like the way you put that because that's what I want to bring to the table. It's like, oh, am I going to walk out the front door and have all these things happen? And I wanted to suspend that disbelief and make people think that, oh, maybe it can.
So interestingly, then, for anyone who wants to jump in on this, with changing genres or adapting, as we've spoken about earlier, improving our writing and changing the way we write because of growth, how or do you have the same schedules and kind of processes that you have for each book that you write, or have things changed, or are they exactly the same?
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that was a contemplating sound.
That was a ponderous grunt.
You forgot to stroke the beard, Chris.
What schedule?
Well,
what schedule? Nice.
I don't really have a schedule. I think what I did do with the last 2 books is I told myself, I said, as soon as I'm not enjoying it and to stop writing and not let myself write until I'm having fun again, which might sound kind of juvenile, but it's helped me a lot to break free of that doubt. And what I found is that the books need a little bit more like editing, yet I think once I kind of chip away, it's a better story. So like, I just said the only thing I want to do is I want to have fun. I want to enjoy writing again. I want to write stories that matter to me. And as soon as instead of like going in every day and writing and then saying like the mental kind of interrogation of, is it good enough? Is it good enough? Instead of saying that, I just say, am I having fun? Because it doesn't matter if it's good enough. Just if you're having fun, it'll eventually be good enough, you know? So I think that's where I've changed. It's just brought me a lot more enjoyment in drafting and editing, and I used to hate editing. So that for me has been a real game changer.
And you can edit something too much, and you can edit something not enough, and then you're trying too hard to figure out what that balance is. It's just too much. So if when you read back through it, for me, I have to see it reading back through it and like get the idea of what's going on there. I'm more looking for things that throw me out of it, because I don't really want to read words on a page. I want to see those, and some people don't. And it's really odd to me that those people exist that like read stuff and don't see it. But that's how I work and how I write. So if you're one of those people that reads and can't see, I'm probably not for you. But that's outside the point. I'm kind of rambling. But, I'm just scared sometimes that I am going to edit like my first paragraph or my first chapter or my first whatever into the ground so hard that I've ruined it. So I limit how much I can tweak.
You can like sand. It's like kind of like woodwork. Like you can sand something so much that it starts losing its integrity. And that's what I've tried to look at, like my editing, because I will go at it with like a hammer and then be like, okay, like honestly, no one's gonna give a shit. If, like
rubbed a hole right in the middle with that.
Yeah. So for a tip then, if anyone's got one, based on what you've just said, how do you tell when it is that time to stop the edits? Because like you said, you can go too far, you can push too much, you can overload yourself and overwhelm yourself with that edit process. So how do you know now is the time to stop? What tips have you got?
Definitely what Milo said about not having fun anymore. That's the thing.
Yeah.
I think you got to get the draft out, then you got to distance yourself, then you've got to ask somebody else to look at it. Like, because I think we all forget a lot of times, like being an author and producing books and putting them out into the world, it's not a single process. It's a team effort and a team game. So if you're not consulting a team in any way, shape or form, like it doesn't have to be an editor, you might not be at that stage, especially if you're self-publishing and stuff, you might not be able to afford an editor, you might not know an editor, but it can be beta readers, people that you've met online, fellow writers, people that you appreciate their work and you've enjoyed reading their work. Those type of people, I think when you're thinking, I don't really know what to do here, should I take the hammer to it? I think that's the time you need to step away and give it over to somebody else for a little bit, because I suppose it's like your kids in a way. If they're really getting on your nerves, like sometimes it's good if a parent or like your grandparent steps in and takes them away for an hour, gives you a bit of time to recuperate. And it's the same process with a book, give it over to somebody else, see what they think. And again, don't let it define you, but it's good to have, if somebody says, I didn't like this bit, if you really like it, maybe just keep it in. But what it will do is it'll reaffirm to you whether you actually want it or not. So sometimes it's good to open it up a little bit.
Absolutely. Great advice. Anna, over to you. Little quiet Anna in the corner.
I think for me with editing, I know when a story's done, when I can go back and like read through the whole thing and say, I really liked these bits, and I know that these are the transition bits, so they have to be there. So even if I'm not like, oh my God, this is the best part of the story, like I can recognize that each part of the story is necessary because it's what gets you through the story. So it's like, I may be like, oh my God, I absolutely hated this part, and then go through and edit it into the ground. But eventually, like once I can come back and read the story after I've distanced myself from it, I can recognize that this part that I didn't love was necessary.
Yeah. I like that. Cool. What I'd like to do then is we've got about 15 minutes left. So guys, please do start sending some questions in. We haven't had any. There's like 40 people watching. Questions, send them in. So we're going to talk author author. You say it's naughty?
Sorry. I'm an instigator.
It's naughty. It's naughty. We're going to talk about author brand and author identity. So building an author profile is something we've mentioned, and I know there's a lot of good advice within this group, so I'd like to extract that for the people watching. Building an author brand, an author profile is very important for people. It can be done before the start of your author launch or your book launch. Give us some tips. How do we do that, and what's the best way that you've discovered to build an author brand?
As an author, I like sharing things. I haven't done social media, like I haven't posted to Instagram for my author in a while, but in addition to having book promotion things and whatnot, I also like to share things that I like personally in my real life, beyond my nom de plume. So I love nature photography. I love little things like that. So I think, making that as part of my author brand, it fleshes me out as Anya Pavel, the person, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So I don't want the author brand to just be the author. I don't want her to be my real me in my real life, in every way, shape, or form. But I think, having some pops of personality beyond just about writing has helped to a certain extent. And it makes it feel more authentic to me, especially since I use a pen name.
Definitely. Anyone else?
Yeah. I was just going to say there's obviously two sides to this, I think. There's all of the good stuff that we've learned over the years on the Writing Community Chat Show that people should do. So I'm going to go through that before I'm going to say my little side piece. Creating your website, getting on all the social media platforms, all those types of things are what a lot of people who are very successful do. Constantly writing new books and releasing new material, because that's going to grow your audience. Again, is something that a lot of people mention when they're on the show. Don't stay stagnant on that one book. We're not all Harper Lee and are going to make millions off one. Might have to keep going. So that's all the brand stuff and what I think is some of the nuggets of information that people have given us over the years. But also the more positive mental health side of me at the minute is thinking, like, if that's not you, just don't do it. Because there's pros and cons to it. An author brand, like Anya's saying there, putting yourself out there, fleshing this brand out, it takes a lot of time and effort, man. And you're gonna get you could get people who read your work and give you a load of shit about it and all that type of stuff. And I think sometimes we are authors. We do spend a lot of time writing in our rooms by ourselves. We're not necessarily trying to open ourselves up to the world and going, oh, look at me. We just want to get something on the page. So it's almost the opposite of what we'd like to do. I like having conversations like this, but I don't like posting stuff on Instagram and all that type of stuff. I'd rather protect and preserve my own mental health and concentrate on the writing than worry about followers and all that type of stuff. We ask a question on the show, like, what does success look like to you? And, people say, oh, I can make a living off it and all that type of stuff. For me, it's just that you get to keep doing it. And I couldn't care less if one person reads it or a million. It's still going to be the same for me. The process is still going to be the same. What I write is still going to be the same. But I know that's controversial because that's not what people want to hear.
No, I think what's valuable there is that both examples of building an author brand using social media and to showcase yourself is one brilliant example of how to do that. And doing things the way that you described is a perfect way and a perfect example of how to do that. It all depends on that person's personality, how they want to portray themselves and how they want to deal with their career. And it doesn't have to be an author career. It could be something like Chris mentioned, where you just want to do it for the fun. Halo mentioned about enjoying it. So if you want to just do it, like when I published my first book, was literally for the satisfaction and the achievement of publishing a book, then do it just for that. And then you could be done. Or you could work on it and see where it goes. There is no outline of what you have to do. It's a creative world, and there's creative freedom.
What I will say about that, I guess, is there's a lot of authors that are still reclusive, they're recluses themselves. Is recluses the right term? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But they literally cut themselves off from the world. They send their book out into the world and it's done. Sally Rooney, for example. Could you get Sally Rooney to do an author interview on this show? Absolutely not. Does she do any sort of publicity when a book comes out? No, she lets her write and speak for herself. So it can be done. If you're that type of person, you're sat there thinking, I don't want to do all that. Do you know what? There's probably a uniqueness about that. So stick to that and just have faith in the actual process and the words on the page. And the people will find your writing if it's strong enough.
Absolutely. Right.
I'm a lot less worried about a social media presence now than I was before because I had it all. I built it up. It was getting huge and then it crashed right out from under me. So like definitely if you're going to spend a lot of time on it, don't do it all in one place because like Twitter could get sold or something.
Yeah.
Well, we've seen the downfall of that very recently. What I want to do is I want to cut that conversation a little quick because we've had 2 really good questions in and we've got 10 minutes left. This may take us 10 minutes to go through them. The first one, there's a name, Nom Zakandi, I think. So let me put these up on the screen. I'm a recent college graduate in May. Congratulations to you for graduating. And I've been taking my time dabbling in creative projects, trying to find where I feel best. I've been attending panels and events to surround myself with other creatives. I've written bad poetry. Come on now. Bad poetry collection years. I've written a bad poetry collection years that I've since scrapped. Years ago that I've scrapped. Then I was a writer for my campus newspaper for a while after I took a creative non-fiction course. I am working with fiction. I feel a lot of insecurity because I don't know what I'm looking for. Can you give me some advice when it comes to finding yourself in writing? Which I think is a really good question. So thank you for that. And again, congratulations. Anyone got any tips on finding yourself when it comes to writing?
I kind of do.
Go ahead.
Anna?
I was going to say I kind of do because I kind of came from a similar background. I up to recently, all of my writing has been very academic. It's been things that it's been like translation work and things that I've wanted to get published in like an academic setting and that kind of thing. And I recently started like I've always had an idea for a novel that I wanted to write. And I recently actually did start writing it. And for me, I think what helped was like knowing what the story was that I wanted to tell. And so like, even though I'm still working on getting through that story, I know what the story will be when I'm done with it. Like, it's not like with all of my academic writing where I have to do lots of research and lots of like looking things up and contacting other academics and waiting for responses and all this other stuff. This story is coming from me. It's a story that I know personally. Like, I know what's happening in this story. So I think that's one thing that like really helped me in that transition.
Thank you. Great answer. Adria.
I was going to say that my writing found me in a way because I just kind of started and then it kind of, those first couple of things I wrote pummeled themselves into my head and then like changed me, made me like I became, I've done come around so much. Things have changed. Things I didn't know about myself were discovered. I think the thing you have to do is dive in with your heart open and just do it, push through it. Once you hit that character that speaks to you, they're not going to stop till you're done.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe they will, but like they didn't for me.
Well, Halo, Chris and myself definitely have killed some characters. What I just want to jump in there, and I know I've talked a lot, but I want to add to this. I was someone that was terrible at English in school. I ended up writing a book because it was just nagging at me. That's like kind of Adria said, there's a story that kind of called. And I was just started writing it. It was all self-taught. I wasn't that good to start with. It's grown. So what I'm saying is that you can just get into it. And what that's led on to is the creation and this show happening for 4 years with me and Chris, and screenplays and other stories that's happened because of that very first moment. I didn't know any of this was going to happen. Like Adria said, it's about discovery. So as soon as you tap into that journey, you don't know where it's going to take you and how it's going to take you forward. So everyone always says this, and the key is just start. And yes, you might feel pressure on the first book release, like everyone really does. But don't stress about it too much. I know my first book needs a bit of work, but I'm not stopping that from letting me progress further on. I will go back and address that one day, but it's not my priority right now. So I wouldn't say stress about that first book too much. I would say what Halo's highlighted massively, enjoy the process and then see where that takes you.
I think insecurities are going to come from the fear of other people and exposing your work to other people. But I think when you become comfortable in the fact that some people are going to hate every single word that you write, and some people are going to love it. Okay,
Yeah.
but your writing will find its audience at some point, and you just need to keep going with that. Like, ignore the haters, ignore the people who love you, embrace them a little bit, but it doesn't matter. Just keep going regardless.
You're talking about extremes there that I'm not really, I'm not seeing that. There'll be people that hate everything and people that love everything, but for the most part, there's going to be a lot of people that just don't care.
Yeah.
They do not
take
care that
comfort
you've
in
written
that.
a book. They do not care that you've poured your heart and soul into the paper. They just are not going to pay you any attention unless you're already famous for some other thing that you don't want to be famous for. Don't worry about it. Push through. The fact that you're not immediately grabbing everyone's attention is not this huge intrinsic failure. It's a small step that
I'm
you
really
will
sorry.
take and you'll overcome.
I realized I just jumped into the next question without even showing it, and I'm so sorry. Noms. Thank you for your question. But this was Gabby's question that I just jumped into. It was stuck in my brain. So I've heard from others that the first published book is often seen as important to your reputation to publishers. And I guess the audience is what we kind of discussed. How do you bounce back when the first book doesn't do as well as you want? So thank you for that question. I'm sorry I didn't put that up before we started talking about it, but there it is, guys. Yeah.
I don't think most of us are dealing with a lot of publishers. I know that like Anya's got a book that's with that was with a publisher. I don't know what happened. I never heard the rest of it.
The publisher just closed down, but the books are still with the publisher.
Okay.
So
I knew there was something, but I couldn't quite remember what it was. But we're a lot of indie folks here, and like we are the publisher. So I guess the damage control's on us. I mean, we don't have to answer to that publisher. We just have to get out there and do it again and do a good job. And
that is a real thing.
Interest.
That is a real thing that people have talked about on the show. And the way that people have dealt with it is they've either reinvented themselves and gone again, either under a different pen name or completely removed themselves, or they've switched from traditional publishing to self-publishing and they've gone down their own route. Or they've switched their genre completely. So they may have reinvented themselves, i.e. staying in the same genre, different name, or they've reinvented themselves completely and switched to a different genre. Again, it doesn't always work. You could have a great book that doesn't take off. And he was a really good example of this. We had somebody on recently where their first 2 books didn't take off with their publisher. They went to somebody else, had some success, and then that publisher bought their first 2 books and redistributed them, and they're doing much better. And I can't remember who that was, but it was very recent. So I would say don't pay too much attention to that first book. If it doesn't do well, it could be the market, it could be the time, it could be lots of different things. And, it could be successful in the future. Just keep persevering with your own writing, keep producing stuff, keep getting it out there. And, one day maybe something will click and then people will have a whole backlog of books to go and read and binge.
One of my favorite authors had a similar thing happen where her first book was a young adult thing that, had some traction, but not too much. And then her second book was purchased as this crime novel. And then boom, and then the first the agent and publisher who acquired the second novel, bought out the first one. And so I think, as long as you are willing to kind of, go where that next book takes you and work with agents to really, I guess, polish and sell that second book, then previous things can be easily surmounted.
The third or the fourth or the fifth book. I mean, you can do this. There is no time limit for you. You can go at it for 20 years and you may not ever push through but for me, finding those 2 or 3 readers will keep me going. And
you never know when the lightning in a bottle will strike. So that's the thing too. Because a lot of people say that, and actually I'm rambling, but for people who have had success, sometimes it has been luck, strictly luck, being at the right place, the right time, and they didn't know when that was going to happen. And that happens in creative media of all type. It's being in that right place at the right time with the person, the circumstances, the weather, all of that. But if you don't keep trying at it, like going back to the whole failure or, growth thing, the whole growth process. So you never know when it's going to take off. And so being present there is important.
But like Chris said, that time can come around and around. Okay. So don't stop. We are out of time, guys. That has been a wonderful chat. And thank you, every single one of you, for tuning in. We do have to wrap this up because the Brooklyn Book Festival is on a tight schedule.
Still going.
But thank you so much for letting us be part of this. I will finish up and summarize with this quote from Albert Einstein, which is, the measure of intelligence is the ability to change. And that's what we've been talking about, is change, a growth, creative process, and feeling yourself, not like that, enjoying yourself and just moving forward. So thank you so much for being part of this. And thank you for your questions, guys. It's been wonderful to chat with everybody. We'll see you all hopefully next year for another show. But if we don't, we'll see you in the week, and enjoy your weekend. Bye-bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.